My name is Claire Thompson. I am 26 years old. I live in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the north side of Indianapolis, Indiana. 3 months ago, my father passed after a brief illness. On a quiet Tuesday evening in early March, I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by the last boxes from his house, and opened a worn manila folder I had not touched before. Inside was a single notarized page and a short handwritten note in his careful block letters. The document stated that he had kept records of a business dispute from years earlier involving the family of someone I knew well. He wrote that he hoped I would never need it, but if the time came I would know what to do with it. I read the page twice, folded it back into the folder, and placed it on the coffee table without speaking out loud. Later that same evening, my phone lit up with a message from Ryan. He said he would not make it to the dinner we had planned because Brooke needed him to stay late at the co-working space to finish materials for a client presentation. The message ended with the usual line about how Brooke was just trying to help him build something real. I set the phone down and looked at the folder again. I did not feel anger or surprise. I simply noted the time and the wording. Brooke Sullivan had been my closest friend since we were 19. We met in a community college marketing class and had stayed close through every job change and every relationship. Ryan, Mitchell, and I had been together for almost 2 years. Brooke had introduced him to several small clients and had recently offered him a regular role helping with her event planning side work. At first it seemed generous. Over the past 6 weeks, the tone had changed in small ways that were easy to dismiss one at a time. The first time I noticed anything concrete was 2 weeks after I found the folder. I stopped by the co-working space on a Thursday afternoon to drop off a sandwich Ryan had forgotten. The main room was quiet except for Brooke's voice carrying from the glass-walled corner she used as an informal office. She was standing over Ryan while he sat at a laptop. 2 other freelancers were at nearby tables, pretending not to listen. "You missed the margin alignment again," Brooke said, in the same even tone she used when ordering coffee. "If you cannot handle basic formatting without someone holding your hand, I am not sure why I am wasting time introducing you to people who actually produce results. Some of us have actual stakes in these rooms." Ryan kept his eyes on the screen and nodded once. He did not argue. He simply reopened the file and began adjusting the numbers. Brooke turned, saw me in the doorway, and smiled the same bright smile she had always used with me. "Claire, perfect timing. Ryan was just telling me how supportive you are of his work. We are almost done here if you want to wait." I placed the sandwich on the table nearest the door and said I would see Ryan later. I did not raise my voice or stay. On the drive home, I recorded the exact words Brooke had used and the time in a notes app on my phone. It was the first entry. The following week, Brooke began leaving me out of the group text she used to organize dinners with our small circle of friends. When I asked Ryan about it, he said Brooke had mentioned that I seemed stressed since my father's death and that she was trying to give me space. I did not correct him. I simply added the date and the explanation to the same notes file. Tyler Brooks, a colleague from the marketing firm where I handled client accounts, stopped by my desk one morning with a printed email chain. He pointed to 3 messages that had gone out under my name to a shared freelance client. The tone in the replies was colder than anything I had written. Tyler said the client had called him directly and asked whether I was still reliable. When he checked the sent folder, he found the messages had been forwarded from an address that matched Brooke's business domain. He asked if I wanted him to dig further. I told him to copy everything and send it to a private folder we both could access. I thanked him and went back to my spreadsheet. I did not explain why I needed the records. By the end of that month, Ryan was staying at the co-working space 4 nights a week. Brooke had started referring to him in conversations with mutual friends as my project. She never said it to my face, but the phrasing reached me through Lauren Hayes, another woman in our circle who still answered my texts. Lauren told me Brooke had said Ryan needed someone who understood ambition without making it about feelings. I wrote the sentence down exactly as Lauren repeated it. The notarized page from my father remained in the folder on the coffee table. I had not shown it to anyone. I had not decided what to do with it. I only knew that every new entry in the Notes app made the paper feel heavier. If you have ever watched the person you trusted most begin to rewrite the story of your own life, in small, plausible pieces, you will understand why I kept adding lines instead of confronting anyone yet. The next morning, I called Tyler Brooks at the marketing firm and asked whether he had found any additional messages that had gone out under my name or any patterns in the client pullouts. He arrived at my desk before lunch with a printed stack and a quiet expression. He pointed to a chain in which someone using Brooks' business domain had replied to a long-term freelance client of mine, suggesting that my recent work had become inconsistent because of personal issues. The client had canceled 2 upcoming projects the same week. Tyler said the language matched the tone Brooke used when she spoke about people she considered unreliable. He offered to keep a separate log of every forwarded message. I told him to do exactly that and to send copies only to the private folder we shared. I did not explain the folder on my coffee table or the notarized page inside it. That evening, I met Rebecca Holt for the first time. She was a contracts attorney whose name had come up in a professional group I belonged to. We sat in a small conference room at her office downtown. I showed her the notarized page and the short note my father had written by hand 3 months earlier. Rebecca read both without speaking. When she finished, she asked whether I had any other records from the time period the document referenced. I told her I did not, but that I was willing to locate the old associate whose sworn statement appeared on the page if it became necessary. She said the document on its own carried weight because it was notarized and dated, but that using it would require care. She advised me to keep every new message and every new incident logged with dates and exact wording. I left her office with a single instruction from her: do not react in the moment. I already had no intention of doing so. 2 nights later, I stopped by the co-working space again. This time, I did not bring food. I simply wanted to see whether Ryan would still be there at the hour he had told me he would be finished. The main room was nearly empty. Brooke stood near the large monitor at the front while Ryan adjusted the settings on a projector. 2 other people I recognized from previous gatherings sat at side tables. Brooke's voice carried clearly across the open space. Ryan, if you are going to keep letting Claire's expectations dictate when you can finish client work, then perhaps you should reconsider whether you actually want the introductions I have been making for you. Some of us built our networks by showing up when it mattered instead of running home to manage someone else's feelings. Ryan kept his back to the room and continued adjusting the projector. He did not turn around or answer. One of the people at the side tables glanced up and then quickly looked down again. I stayed in the doorway long enough to be certain I had heard the words correctly, then left without speaking to anyone. On the drive home, I added the exact sentence to the notes file and noted the time and the witnesses present. The following weekend, Brooke sent a group text to the circle that included Ryan, Lauren Hayes, and 2 other mutual friends. The message invited everyone to a small dinner at her apartment to celebrate a new client she had signed. My name was not on the list. When Lauren texted me separately to ask whether I was coming, I replied that I had not been invited. Lauren did not answer for several hours. When she finally wrote back, she said Brooke had told her I was still grieving and probably needed time alone. I saved both messages. By the end of that week, Tyler sent me another set of forwarded emails. This time, the pattern was clearer. Brooke had begun copying clients on messages that highlighted small delays in my freelance deliverables, while omitting the fact that the delays had originated with last-minute changes Brooke herself had requested through Ryan. The effect was a quiet erosion of my standing with 2 accounts that had been steady for more than a year. Tyler asked whether I wanted him to speak to anyone on my behalf. I told him no. I asked him to continue copying everything and to let me know if any client mentioned Brooke's name directly. I reread my father's handwritten note that same night. He had written that he hoped I would never need the attached page, but that if someone began rewriting the rules of fairness in my life, I should remember that paperwork outlasts explanations. The notarized statement itself was a sworn account from a former business partner of Brooke's family describing a settlement that had been presented as voluntary but had been obtained after pressure that included withheld payments and public criticism of the partner's competence. The partner had signed the settlement to avoid further damage to his own reputation. My father had kept a copy because he had once considered investing in the same circle and had wanted a record in case the pattern repeated. I did not feel any sudden surge of emotion while reading the note again. I simply placed it back in the folder and added one more line to the Notes app. Father's statement references prior use of reputation pressure to force unfavorable agreements. Pattern matches current behavior. The next afternoon, Brooke called me directly for the first time in several weeks. Her voice was the same warm tone she had always used when we were close. "Claire, I wanted to check on you. Ryan mentioned you have been quiet lately. I know losing your dad was hard. If you need space from the group for a while, I completely understand. We are all here when you are ready." I thanked her for the call and said I was managing. I did not mention the group text she had sent without me or the comments she had made in the co-working space. After the call ended, I added her exact words and the time to the file. 2 days later, Ryan came to my apartment after work. He looked tired. He sat on the edge of the couch and said Brooke had offered him a larger role managing logistics for her upcoming events if he could commit to being available on short notice for the next several months. He said it would mean fewer evenings free, but that it was the kind of opportunity that did not come often. I asked him whether Brooke had attached any conditions to the offer. He looked at his hands and said she had only asked that he make sure his personal life did not create distractions for the clients. I asked whether that meant me. He did not answer directly. He said Brooke was only trying to protect the work she had built. I told him I understood. I did not argue or ask him to choose. After he left, I added the conversation to the notes file with the date and the time he arrived and left. Then I opened the folder on the coffee table and removed the notarized page. I scanned it again and saved a digital copy to the same private folder Tyler and I shared. I did not send it to anyone yet. I only made sure the copy existed in more than one place. The following morning, I received a text from Brooke. It was the first direct message she had sent me in more than a month. "Claire, I think it would be better if we gave each other some space for a while. Ryan is under a lot of pressure right now, and I do not want to add to it. I hope you understand." I read the message twice. I did not reply. I saved it with the timestamp and added one line beneath it, "Direct request for distance after pattern of exclusion and public criticism documented." That evening, I called Rebecca Holt again. I told her I had additional dated records of repeated small exclusions, public criticism in front of witnesses, and redirected client communications. I asked whether the combination of the notarized historical statement and the current pattern would be enough to create professional consequences if shared selectively. Rebecca said selective sharing with people who already held influence over Brooke's work could create quiet pressure without requiring a full public filing. She reminded me again to keep every record dated and exact. I thanked her and ended the call. The next day, I contacted one person whose name appeared in my father's old records, the former business partner, whose sworn statement was on the notarized page. He was retired and living outside Indianapolis. I told him I had found my father's copy of his statement and that a similar pattern of reputation pressure seemed to be repeating with someone in my own circle. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said he had signed the old settlement because continuing the fight would have cost him more than the money involved. He said he had no interest in revisiting it publicly, but that if I could show him current evidence that matched the old method, he would consider speaking privately to one or two people still active in the local business network. I thanked him and said I would send only the dated logs for now. I did not send the notarized page itself. By the end of that week, 2 of Brooks' regular clients had begun asking questions about scheduling reliability after receiving quiet inquiries from the retired partner's remaining contacts. Brooks' name appeared less frequently in the usual networking invitations around Indianapolis. She did not mention any of it to me. Ryan continued to stay late at the co-working space. Lauren Hayes stopped answering my texts after I asked whether she had noticed any change in how Brooks spoke about Ryan's availability. I sat on the floor of my apartment one evening with the folder open in front of me and the Notes app open on my phone. The records now filled several screens. The notarized page lay on top of the folder. I had not yet decided the exact moment to use it. I only knew that the pattern my father had documented years earlier had reappeared in smaller repeated steps that were easy to ignore until they were not. If the person who once defended you begins to use the same methods against you that once harmed someone else, the paperwork your father left behind stops feeling like history and starts feeling like the only record that cannot be rewritten in the moment. The following Monday, I sent Walter Klein the dated log excerpts I had kept. I included only the entries that showed repeated public criticism of Ryan in front of witnesses, the redirected client messages, and Brooks' direct request that I give her space after months of exclusion. I did not attach the notarized page itself. Walter replied the next day that he would make 2 private calls to people still active in the Indianapolis business network. He said he would not mention my name or my father's document. He would only ask whether anyone had noticed a recent pattern of one person using reputation pressure to control access to opportunities. I thanked him and closed the message. 3 days later, Tyler Brooks came to my desk again. He placed a single printed email on the surface without speaking. It was from one of Brooks' larger event clients canceling a contract that had been in place for more than a year. The client cited scheduling reliability concerns after receiving an inquiry from someone in Walter Klein's former circle. Tyler said another client had called him directly that morning, asking whether Brooks' operation was still stable. I added both incidents to the notes file with the exact wording from the cancellation email and the time of Tyler's visit. That same afternoon, Brooks sent me a single text. It read, "I heard you have been talking to people about me. That was a mistake." I saved the message with the timestamp and added one line, "First direct acknowledgement that external inquiries reached her." The next evening, I asked Ryan to meet me at my apartment. I also asked Brooke to come. I told them both I had records I wanted to show them once. Ryan arrived first and sat on the edge of the couch the way he had the last time. Brooke arrived 10 minutes later. She did not take off her coat. She stood near the door with her arms crossed. I placed printed copies of the dated logs on the coffee table. I did not raise my voice. I said I had kept records of every public comment Brooke had made about Ryan's work in front of other people, every client message that had been altered or forwarded under my name, and every instance in which I had been excluded from group plans after Brooke began managing Ryan's time. I placed the notarized page from my father on top of the stack. I said the page documented a previous instance in which reputation pressure had been used to force an unfavorable agreement, and that the pattern matched what I had recorded over the past several weeks. Brooke looked at the papers without touching them. Her voice stayed even. "You really have lost it, Claire. Your father was sick at the end. Everyone knows that. You are dragging old nonsense into something that has nothing to do with you, because you cannot stand that Ryan is finally getting real opportunities instead of sitting around waiting for you to feel secure. This is pathetic. Ryan kept his eyes on the floor. He did not look at the papers. He said Brooke had been the only person willing to give him consistent work when other contacts had gone quiet. He said walking away now would mean starting over with nothing. He said he understood why I was upset, but that Brooke was only protecting the work she had built. I asked him whether he had heard the comments Brooke made about him in the co-working space. He said he had heard them. He said they were difficult to listen to, but that Brooke was under pressure from her own clients, and that taking it personally would not help anyone. He did not offer to stop working with her. Brooke picked up the top page of the logs, glanced at it, and let it fall back onto the table. None of this matters, she said. People will believe what they want to believe. You have already made yourself look unstable by going to Walter Klein. That name still carries weight with some of the older contacts. Congratulations! You managed to make one phone call matter more than 2 years of actual work. I hope it was worth it. She turned to Ryan. We are done here. If you want the larger role I offered, you need to decide tonight whether you are going to keep letting her pull you into drama. I do not have time for this. Ryan stood up. He looked at me for the first time since he arrived. I am sorry, Claire. I need the work. Brooke is the one who can give it to me right now. He walked to the door. Brooke followed him without looking back at the papers on the table. The door closed behind them. I remained seated on the floor beside the coffee table. I did not move the papers. I added the exact words Brooke had used and the time they left to the notes file. Over the next 10 days, 2 more of Brooke's regular clients withdrew their contracts after quiet conversations with contacts who had spoken with Walter Klein. The owner of the co-working space where Brooke held most of her meetings asked her to find another location for her events after one of the remaining freelancers mentioned the pattern of public criticism. Brooke stopped appearing in the usual networking invitations that circulated among the Indianapolis marketing and events circles. Lauren Hayes sent me one final text saying she thought I had gone too far and that she needed to step back from our friendship. 2 other mutual friends stopped replying altogether. Ryan did not contact me again. I removed his name from the notes file and closed the document. 3 weeks after the meeting in my apartment, I sat on the same living room floor with the empty folder in front of me. The notarized page and the printed logs were no longer there. I had sent the originals to Rebecca Holt for safekeeping and deleted the digital copies from every device except one secure backup. The apartment was quiet. The boxes from my father's house had been emptied and carried to the curb days earlier. I had lost the relationship I had built with Ryan and the friendships that had once included Brooke and Lauren. I had also ended the possibility of any quiet reconciliation with the circle that had once felt like the only stable part of my life in Indianapolis. Brooke's professional footing in the local network had cracked in measurable ways, lost contracts, relocated meetings, fewer invitations, but she still held the remaining work she had offered Ryan and the ability to continue operating outside the circles that had quietly distanced themselves. I had chosen to use the only record my father left that could not be rewritten in the moment. The choice had produced consequences for Brooke that paperwork alone could create. It had also required me to accept that Ryan would remain aligned with the person who controlled his immediate opportunities, and that several people I had once considered close would believe Brooke's version of events, rather than the dated record I had kept. I stood up, placed the empty folder in the recycling bin, and walked to the window that faced the street. The evening light in Indianapolis was the same ordinary gray it had been on the Tuesday I first opened my father's papers. I had released the tie that had allowed repeated small violations to continue without consequence. The release had cost me the relationship and the friendships. It had also removed the daily need to document or absorb the next criticism or exclusion. Some ties can only be ended by accepting that the person on the other end will not change, and that staying would require pretending the pattern does not exist. I had stopped pretending. Thank you for listening to my story. What's your breaking point?